I had this meme sent to me from an agent that I did a deal with recently, and it was a really tough deal. And we were talking about how the last few months have been the hardest of our careers. Both of us have been in the business over a decade, and it was really refreshing to understand that it wasn't just my perspective. Anyway, the meme was basically that all buyers think it's 2008, the crash, and that all the sellers think it's still 2021 during COVID, and that all of us agents think we're selling sunset, which we're not. But that was also a hilarious inside joke between her and I. But it made me think about this episode, which is basically do's and don'ts of what to do in a tough market. I actually will tell you that these are do's and don'ts of just buying and selling, period.
Right.
But because we're in a tougher market and there are different rules of engagement, which by the way, I think is what is causing the tough market.
Okay, so
Let me
how's
explain.
it? Let's talk about how it's tough.
Yeah.
Because that can mean different things to different people.
Yes. So I'll tell you, I'm going to qualify whatever I would say why I'm saying it's tough. So in general, people's personalities, this is just the reality of human nature, is that people like to do what everybody else is doing, right? Most people do not like to sway from the mainstream, and that is fine. And we saw it during COVID, where people needed rules to understand what to do during COVID. And so go take that and then look at the COVID time of the housing market. Everyone understood the rules, right? We all need rules in our lives to understand, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Maybe you break them once in a while, but the reality is that we have a framework. And during COVID, we knew it was seller's market. No one could say it wasn't, right? It was a seller's market. There wasn't enough inventory. Buyers were at the mercy of sellers most of the time. It set the buyer's expectation. They knew that they had to probably put in 10 offers. We had to run out and get deposit checks. We knew that offer nights were a thing. This is how it was.
Oh yeah, I bought during COVID. You're right.
So
no conditions. That's just you just knew that. Yeah.
But again, those were the rules. Everybody knew they were the rules. I don't know who set them. It wasn't me. Don't get mad at me. So this is how it worked. Now we're in a recovery. I would call us in a recovery state, and not so much recovery like going this way recovery. I just mean we're coming out of a very unknown time and we're reestablishing where the market is, right? And it is a little bit disjointed because detached are still in demand, semi and townhouses still in demand based on affordability and price points for that reason. And then condos are softer, it's more of a buyer's market. I digress. So buyers and sellers are not on the same page. And that is causing this market to be tough because things are still selling, people still want to be homeowners, but buyers and sellers are not on the same page.
Right, and so what ends up happening is that you have a protracted sale process. Is that fair to say?
You have more contentious of a sales process. And so this is where I wanted to do the do's and don'ts because I believe the expectations have changed immensely. So again, I'm going to use COVID as like the yardstick because everybody remembers. So you went out to buy a house, you got what you got, and you didn't get upset about it because you were just lucky to win a house, right? You didn't say, hey, the ice maker's rattling. Or, you know what, the basement shower door knob is a little bit loose.
Yeah.
So, oh no, I got an email from an agent with a list of things that were clearly copied and pasted from her client. And she's an amazing agent, don't get me wrong. It was just like, there's a glass brick that's come over the lawn from the neighbors. Will that be removed before closing? What? So I'm gonna go remove it. It's fine. I'm just saying that would never have been a conversation during COVID. Right. So I want to kind of start on the list side because if you are thinking about listing in this market, and when I say this market, I mean, first of all, don't list now. Don't list now. It's going into the summer. It's weird. I've told several people who I'm working with, wait until the fall.
Yeah.
It's, there's still seasonality, which we just got off talking about, but I think it's very important to understand your expectations before you go into a list situation right now.
Right. So when you're saying don't list now, this will kind of go into the do's and don'ts of listing. When you say don't list now, is it because there's still lots of inventory and people are going to be going away?
I just think we live in, I think everyone wants to talk about the numbers and investment and spreadsheets and data when it comes to housing. But this business is all about people's lives. It still is. It's still psychologically based. I mean, if you look at the Bank of Canada's rate cut of 0.25 basis points was not an affordability conversation, and yet everybody came out.
Right.
Everybody came out of the woodwork overnight. It was a consumer confidence conversation. It was a it's okay to come out and play conversation. So I would say you live in a country, a city that has snow on the ground 6 months of the year. It's cold. July is still the number one, last time I looked, still the number one month in the year to have a vacation.
Okay.
So people are away. If you're with family, first of all, June, anybody out there with school-age children knows June is an insane month. You've got dance recital competitions. You've got end-of-school awards. You've got graduation parties. You've got, you will be there soon. You've got to get your kids ready for camp. You've got, there's no one's doing anything.
Right.
Okay? If you're single, you're thinking about a vacation. You'd rather be on a patio, having a drink, meeting with friends, going to parties, maybe booking a rental at a cottage.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to open houses. You don't want to go with your agent. You don't want to see me. You don't. You just don't. I don't want to see me. I want to go to my cottage. No. But the reality is that they don't.
Right.
So stuff still, this is why you go from seeing 8,000 homes sold in May or June to 4.
Right.
Right? That's why.
Right.
Okay. So fine. That's why I say.
Okay. So now,
you
pretend,
can, and things will sell, but just you're not going to get the best price. There you go.
Now let's pretend it's fall, and I want to list. I'm not desperate. Let's use that scenario. Or is everyone desperate?
By the way, that's my favorite line when I'll get introduced to a new listing client, and they're like, "We're not in a rush."
Does everyone say that to?
And I'm like, "That's fine. First of all, I understand it's not a fire sale." But you either want to sell or you don't want to sell. Right. I think that's the first thing you really have to ask yourself, because selling your house is an incredible endeavor. It takes a lot of time and effort and investment, by the way. I think that's probably the biggest shock I think most clients have to get over is they think, well, okay, I'm gonna have to outlay money to buy something. I get that. That's what I'm gonna spend money, but I'm selling. So this is where I get to make money, right?
Right, right.
But you actually have to spend some money before you sell your house.
In what way?
Well, it really depends on the state of your house, right? So I would say, I actually want to start with the number one rule. So I would say if you're thinking about selling your house, don't overprice it. That is going to be the number one. And if I had $1 for every time I heard someone say, we believe, or I think.
I'm laughing.
Why?
Because I did that the first time with you, and you're like, don't do this. I'm like, I'm doing this because because then if I have to come down, I have all this room. And then you're like, okay.
But you don't want to go down.
And it didn't work. And then we relisted right at the height, which was the best decision ever. But I even have fallen prey to but it's worth this much. And I think that if I list high, then I can come down and negotiate. It's not how it worked. What instead it does is it alienates people. No one wants to see the home. It doesn't create the hype. Anyway, go ahead.
Listen, I will tell you, it depends also on the seller. But I had this conversation with Darren in my office once about a property, and I said, but if someone's really interested, you would think they would come and have a conversation with me, right? Like, let's negotiate. And he says, we still live in Canada. We're still really polite people. They don't want to offend. And I will tell you a story. I have a buyer. I've known him forever. And we wanted to offer on a townhouse condo.
Right.
It's a amazing townhouse condo in a great location, but it's way overpriced.
Right.
Okay? And when I tell you overpriced, I would say it's at least $150,000 overpriced. Okay? So it's like probably worth somewhere between 1.6 and 1.650, and they're priced at 1.8.
Okay.
So we came in, I don't want to go into why, but we came in and offered 1.5. She won't talk to us. The seller, I shouldn't laugh, but the seller, it was so offended that we came in with lowball. And I explained to the agent why we lowballed. It's a long story. We were willing to come back with a bigger offer, but we had to send the lowball offer for a reason. It doesn't matter what the reason was. And when we went back to send a very respectful offer of 1.650, she wouldn't even sign back to us. She was so offended by our first offer that she wouldn't do it.
Wow. What ended up happening with that listing? Do you know?
So it's still sitting there. She price changed to 1.739 and will not listen to her agent, who's also a very good agent. I've been in contact with her since because we haven't found anything. I still think it would be great for my client. And another property sold in the complex that only proved our offer to be correct. And the third offer, the third unit in that building also just either terminated or did a price change.
Oh, so it's sitting there, and that's like a classic example.
So
She could have set the price for the, anyway.
Listen, and I've said this to clients before, that I work for you. You want to overprice your property. It's one thing. Be respectful of your agent, not to ask them to outlay thousands of dollars to get it ready and stage it and do all the things that we do, good agents, full service agents do, and then say, you know what, don't worry about it. I guess we won't sell, and have the agent be out, $8,000-$10,000. But that's the number one thing. Like, I would tell you, this is the biggest issue in the market right now, would be that properties are overpriced. And the stuff that's sitting there, I'll say to buyers, there's two reasons that it's not selling. One is not because the market is bad. It's because it's either overpriced and they're not willing to negotiate, or there's something actually really wrong with it that you can't get over it at that price either.
Right. So again, price. If you drop the price, you'll get over it if the price is dropped accordingly.
Yeah, well, there are certain things that people want and they don't want. Can they overlook it at a different price? Absolutely.
Let's go back to, actually I'm very curious. So don't overprice. Are you suggesting though underpricing? So a big bone that a lot of buyers had is like, you're listing the home for $999, knowing that it's going to sell for $1.5, $1.6.
Well, that was also COVID. That was like listed. But I remember being in sales meetings and the conversation was, list price didn't matter at that time. Literally, list price did not matter because, and it was by the way, I was overrun with listings. That I was very, very, very blessed to have an enormous amount of business, like many agents, and it was as horrible to be on the other side of it, I have to tell you, because you watch all these kids and they want this house and they love it and they fall in love with it and they see themselves there, and then they're one of 30 and and their agents are trying so hard for them and you can't tell them anything. So I think at that point, it was just, again, it was the rules of engagement. It was shitty. It wasn't great. I get it, but you weren't doing your client a service by listing with a price point. You just weren't.
So in today's market, would you suggest what strategy for listing?
As we call it in this business, holding back offers or having an offer night, meaning you list it below what you believe is market value. And again, the reason is that if, let's say, you were to list a property at X amount of dollars, let's say the house is worth, $1 million and you listed at $1 million, great. And buyer number one, who's got nothing else to do or happens to be in town, comes in on the first day, gives you an offer. Buyer number three, who couldn't come until Friday, but would have given you 1.2 because they had to be on that street and they love that house, and whatever the reason is, that was why you did the holdback offers, because you wanted to make sure that everybody could come in, and because the market was crazy. Right. You actually couldn't put a price. You could give a range, but you weren't ever sure of what, I mean, there were a lot of things that sold that I was like,
For that?
I was like, like you guys have horseshoes. Like like that was incredible, right?
That was one.
So you did very well. So
Thank
I
you,
mean,
Rachel.
I would say the reality is that was just to combat the craziness of that time.
Okay, so it was allowing for more viewers,
But it was
buyers.
also, it was,
There's
and
a
this
hype
is what I
element,
say
but
to
there's a hype
clients.
element.
I tell clients this when they ask, well, what about holding back offers? What about this offer night process? What do you think? What do you think now? And I tell them, you only do it when it's a sure thing. You only do holding back offers when you don't want to leave money on the table for your client. Otherwise, price your property properly, put it out, and negotiate.
Right.
In a market like this, there's still a lot of buyer fatigue, and money's expensive, and they just don't want to fight. Lots of buyers are like, no, I don't want to do offer night. I'll wait.
Are these the same buyers that put in offers during COVID and didn't succeed? Are you seeing them come out of the woodwork? Or are these just a whole fresh new cohort?
That was like a lifetime ago, for sure. No.
Okay, so it's not like they're
And
coming
I wouldn't
back
even
out.
say I don't have anybody who bought in COVID that would want to even sell now,
No,
right?
well, they didn't buy, so they tried to buy, couldn't buy, and they're back out again.
No? Okay.
No, I feel like, unfortunately, there were people that bought, I don't want to say settled, but they bought because they bought what they bought based on the time. And, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, they'll go to something else, right? And not because they need to move out, but like move up or whatever, but just because they were like, okay, like our lives have changed.
Right.
In sense of pricing low, it's actually a really interesting question because I've had clients, I've had to have tough conversations about price change. So we've overpriced it. I've taken their lead. Sometimes sellers just want to know for their own, like, what if we sell right away and I will think, oh my God, what if I could have gotten it? What if we had listened? No problem. First of all, I'm happy to do that. You just don't want to sit there too long.
Right. And what's too long in today's market?
2 weeks. But again, there's no like time frame. It's just more like, listen, 2 weeks with a lot of showings, a lot of interest, but 2 weeks with nothing, right? So it depends.
Yeah.
So I had this conversation with clients recently. We had to do a significant price change. And they said, well, they were very, very hesitant about it. And I said, okay, let's play a scenario out. Let's say I have no idea what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Let's say I am completely wrong.
Right.
Let's say that your house is worth more and this $100,000 price change is the worst idea possible. Do you know what's going to happen? You're going to have a line down the block of people that want to buy your place. Yeah. There actually isn't a risk to pricing your house below. And there are people that are like, okay, my house is worth 2, but you know what? I'm going to put it out for 1.8. I'm not going to hold back offers or anything, but I just want to get activity going.
Right.
And let's see if we can just get a bunch of people in here.
Right. And then start bidding against each other.
If your house is worth $2 million, it will go for $2 million because the market doesn't care what you think.
And so
It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care what I think.
Well, here's something that's really, I think, what people that are selling don't realize. Let's say I list a home for 1.8 and it's really worth 1.2. We get a line up outside the door. We get an offer in for 1.9. I, as a realtor, have to now tell everybody that saw that home that I got an offer in. And that
Legally.
starts
If
to
you're going to
create-
work with it.
Yeah.
So interesting. If you get an offer and you don't plan to work with it, and it's just going to expire, you actually don't have to notify anybody. But
if you've received an offer,
if you're smart and depending on the process, you would of course tell everybody because you want to make sure you get if I was an agent and I had a client who was interested in a property and I didn't get notified, I'd been in contact, they know I booked it, and there was and it got sold. And that happened during COVID.
You will get a complaint from Rika.
Furious.
That's why even if you're not going to entertain it, most realtors will pick up the phone and call everybody. And I think that's a good thing to do. There was a big issue that we had with ghost offers, like offers that never existed. That has to exist. But
oh yeah, you can't lie about it. I've had clients ask, they're like, did they really get it? And I'm like, well, I could call the broker of record and they can pull up and if there's no offer there, they could lose their license.
Yes, there's an offer form that has to be completed and that you as a buyer can request as well. You have to request it through RICO. You can always go straight to the brokerage as well. RICO in
Most of the time
in
you just
Ontario.
move on. Yeah.
Anyway, so don't overprice is the big thing for sellers. What about buyers?
I think I want to do one more on the list before we
Okay,
move on
let's
to
do that.
buyers. You have to understand that money is very expensive. So coming back and saying that your ice maker doesn't work, but it's not a big deal, is a big deal to a buyer because they really may, either they are going to spend money out of their own pocket to fix that ice maker, they have to buy a new fridge. Again, if you look at, you know, what was the last price I was given? Something like, it was someone got a $3,000 a month mortgage payment on a $500,000 mortgage. So $1 million is $6,000. $6,000. And your ice maker becomes a big deal. Yeah. So what I'm seeing more and more when buyers come to buy something is there is a laundry list of things, including, and I just had to do, tighten a handle in a basement bathroom shower door. And it's not, so again, the checking boxes, I don't want to call it nitpicking, like checking boxes, you know, dotting I's, crossing T's, making sure that all of these things are written into offers. And by the way, that's a big thing. We'll talk about it on the buyer side, but understand that when people are coming in to buy, they want perfection. Mm-hmm. That's why only the really good pieces of inventory, something that's really well priced, is selling, because they don't want to come in and have any more costs when they walk in.
Oh, that's a really good way of thinking of it.
They want to be able to come in and go, I've got to deal with my mortgage and my property taxes and all the other things that cost $1 million, like their gas and their groceries and their utilities. But they don't want to worry about a full paint job.
Right.
If you want top dollar and it's not cheap, make sure that you work either with an agent that will bring their own handyman in and have these things done. If they're larger pieces, it's not a dollar for dollar that you're like, well, if I spend $1, do I get $1 back? No, it's not about the dollar for dollar. It's more, what will you lose if you don't do it?
Mm-hmm. And then peace of mind afterwards. Because you don't want to have a buyer prior to close say it wasn't like left in the condition that I like wanted it and whatever.
Is anyone litigating though?
It will be painful. They won't litigate it because it has to be material. Like, hey, you said the roof worked, and you hid the fact that there was a massive hole.
Well, if you hid, yeah, no,
right, okay,
you can't hide,
that's
yeah.
For sure going to be litigated. But at the very least, you don't want to have something coming. Like, you want it as a seller. It's a done deal and it's done, right?
Yes.
Okay.
No, 100%. There's no question. And listen, I mean, again, more and more, either when you list, have an agent that does a pre-inspection, so there's no surprises. It's there. You have the opportunity to fix them. And if you don't, and that's not the way you're going, be assured that a buyer's going to do their own, and they're going to come back and they're either going to ask you to do them or they're going to tell you to knock off the price.
Right.
Like that's the reality. And by the way, it's not just like, oh, they need new floors. Like, new floors cost roughly, depending on what you're putting down.
And size, yeah.
I think it was, a builder recently told me it's $4 a foot labor only. That's how much install is right now. So again, people look at things and they're like, it's just, they can do it themselves, Fine, either reflect it on the price, but be realistic about how much it's gonna cost. Okay, so that's one thing. On a buyer side, I would say you have the opportunity to be able to put all of those things into an offer. So there's a couple of clauses I've also seen that I would say are not, well, they're subjective. So, in good working order, you've heard this.
Yes. What does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. I remember in COVID, there were a bunch of agents that started to cross out good and say great. In court of law, that means, like, I used to laugh, right? So again, I had a first-time buyer go into a condo, and they were like, "There's holes in the walls," like from the staging, like just pin and.
Oh, I thought an actual hole. I'm like,
remember, so there's certain things like if you're not planning to paint your property when you walk in, make sure that your agent writes everything in that offer that you want done. Or ask them to negotiate off the purchase price, and assume this, and this is what I've found. Sellers are not getting the price that they want. they're not going above and beyond to make sure I'm not saying people are bitter. I'm not saying they're spitting on the floor. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying you have to assume that the minimum is done. Okay? So, first of all, there's a clause that says that the property will be left in broom swept condition. That does not mean cleaned. It means it is free of dust balls and garbage on the floor. Like literally, that's it, okay? Good working order is just that it's running.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Big misconception, this is my favorite, the last buyer visit. So, you say, okay, we're gonna go in the day before closing and we're gonna check everything. And so I had an agent go into a condo the day before closing on this, okay, they didn't do a home inspection. It was a condo, whatever, fine, it was an older building. And she calls me and she says, the water pressure in the shower is not strong. Please have your plumber fix this by tomorrow. I actually laughed out loud and I said, the water pressure has not changed since you bought it. And again, these are the things, unless you come in and the fridge is completely broken or there's water on the floor or a door's fallen off or the window is smashed. And by the way, even then, just so you know, if that fridge is not working and that fridge is 9 years old, they owe you the value of a 9-year-old
fridge, not a brand new
fridge.
Yep, big misconception.
So it's important when you're going out as a buyer to understand that these things will just not be done. They won't.
And to make sure that what is it that you actually want done is clearly listed out within the contract, because in order for you to get out of a deal based on that's not really working or the chandelier's broken and we were supposed to be something that we were purchasing, that's not going to nullify the agreement, right? It has to be a material breach in order for there to be an actual breach of contract, which gives rise for you as the purchaser to be able to walk away.
Yeah, you can't not close because the fridge isn't working.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
Or the water pressure is not where you thought it was. It has to be something so egregious that it goes to the heart of the contract, so that if you were to actually buy this thing on closing date, it is not what you originally contracted for.
Yes.
Right? So that is very...
And that is not a broken fixture.
No, it's not a broken fixture. It's not wobbly doors. It's none of that. It's not even scratches on the floor where the furniture was.
Do you remember my story about the sellers that argued with us about a light fixture that they decided after the fact was very, very sentimental to them and they didn't want to leave it for us? And we were like, no, we want the light. It was a long story and we showed up on closing day and the light wasn't there. And again, we had to close and we got the light back, but it doesn't matter. From a pricing standpoint, I'll leave this as the last piece because we started on price with listing as a buyer. Just because something is in a buyer's market and it's listed at X amount does not necessarily mean you go in at $200,000 less. Go with the value. Work with an agent you trust. Have them explain what the value of the market is. I'm always about getting, a deal for everybody. Everybody wants a deal. I understand things are very, very expensive, but, there's still a market value in the market that we're in right now, and everything is not a fire sale. I think that's really, really important to understand. Just because you saw a property and we're in the market that we're in does not mean
it's a fire sale.
That it's overpriced. Look at the numbers, understand what they are, and then always, always, always buy within your means.
That's a good note to end on.
Yes.
Buy within your means.
Buy within your means.
I remember, I think one of our first podcasts we talked about buying in your means as being the most important thing when you invest, and I completely agree with that.
What was the latest TikTok someone wrote? I can't remember. He was like, because we were talking about, maybe capital gains or something, and he wrote under it, he was like, your cushy jobs are about to explode when that bubble bursts. And I'm like,
I'm not a real
first of all, I want to know where my cushy job is. Someone deliver that cushy job. I love my job, but cushy? No, I don't remember what his screen name was, but it wasn't Fart Pants. Remember Fart Pants? Fart Pants was in my early days. He had lots of great things to say to me.
Since then.
I miss you, Fart Pants.
Well,
anyway,
speaking of cushy jobs, I had to go to a meeting.
Yes, thank you.